Hello folks, welcome to the 5th episode of the Space Monkey X Audio Workshop presents Generation Toon. This is your host, Rob Lamley. On Generation Toon, I, a Gen Xer, my wife Andrea, a Millennial, and our daughter Harper, a Gen Zer, watch some of our favorite cartoons from the last 40 years. Last time we discussed The Real Ghostbusters, a show from my formative years, so this time it was Andrea's choice, and she went with MTV's Daria. The story of a smart, cynical high school girl resonated with Andrea, who was a smart, cynical high school girl at the time. Daria was a spin-off of MTV's wildly popular Beavis and Butt-Head, which ran from 1993 until 1997. Daria was a recurring character that was sort of the anti-Beavis and Butt-Head. Daria was spun off from Beavis and Butt-Head because MTV wanted a, quote, girls cartoon, and Daria was an existing character that didn't require MTV to do much development for, so it made sense to give her her own series. Daria debuted on March 3, 1997 and ran for 5 seasons of 13 episodes each, ending on June 25, 2001, with a total of 65 regular episodes. Although Daria was the creation of Beavis and Butt-Head writers Mike Judge and David Felton, they were not involved with the Daria TV show. The brains behind Daria were Glenn Eichler and Susie Lewis. Lewis was a relative newcomer to television. Her first job in the industry was as an intern at MTV. She was later hired on as the music video segment producer for Beavis and Butt-Head. She was in charge of choosing the music videos, editing the segments, as well as writing and recording their commentaries. Since Daria, she's been an executive producer on a lot of TV specials, but her biggest job has been as the supervising producer for Sea Rescue, a syndicated educational TV show for kids about marine wildlife. Eichler got his start editing for National Lampoon magazine. He then became the story editor for Beavis and Butt-Head, as well as the MTV Liquid television series The Max, before producing Daria. He wrote for a handful of cartoons here and there, but the main job he's had for years now is as one of the writers for Stephen Colbert. He worked on The Colbert Report and is still writing for The Late Show today. For this discussion on Generation Toon, we watched the following episodes of Daria. Season 1, Episode 1 is Steamsters. When Daria and her sister Quinn moved to Highland, Texas, their first day at Lawndale High shows the stark differences between the siblings. Quinn is instantly popular, while Daria has to take a class for kids with low self-esteem. It's here where she meets her new best friend, Jane. Season 2, Episode 12, Pierce Me. Daria helps Jane's brother Trent find a birthday present for Jane. Her girlish crush on Trent means he's able to talk her into doing something she would never do on her own, getting her navel pierced. Season 4, Episode 13, Dye, Dye, My Darling. Jane convinces Daria to dye Jane's hair, despite Daria telling her she doesn't know what she's doing. When Daria inevitably messes it up, Jane thinks she did it on purpose because Daria is jealous of Jane's relationship with Tom. Season 5, Episode 13, Boxing Daria. When the family orders a new refrigerator, Daria is drawn to the empty cardboard box that was left behind. Sitting inside gives her comfort, as well as time to reflect on a traumatic event from her past that has shaped who she has become today. And with that, let's get to our conversation about MTV's Daria. Hello, everyone. We are back after a lengthy hiatus. Last time we did my choice, which was The Real Ghostbusters, and now we are on to Andrea's choice, which is...
Daria, of course.
Daria. Little recap as always. Daria ran for 5 seasons of 13 episodes each for a total of 65 episodes. Ran from March of 1997 until January of 2002. Daria was a spin-off of MTV's wildly popular Beavis and Butt-Head, which ran from 1993 until 1997. On that show, Daria was a recurring character that was sort of the anti-Beavis and Butt-Head. She was smart, cynical, introspective, mature, and just about everything those characters were not. Mike Judge was the creator of Beavis and Butt-Head, along with the Beavis and Butt-Head writer David Felton, who created Daria, the character. They gave permission for the show to be produced about her, but neither had any involvement in the show. MTV said they wanted a girls' show, and Daria was an existing character.
Welcome to the 90s. We're going to gender everything.
Exactly.
It's going to be great.
They wanted a girls' show, and Daria was an existing character they could work with that was on one of the most popular shows on MTV. So it kind of made sense to spin her off into her own series. We watched, what was it, 5 episodes? 4 episodes. 4. We started with the very first one. The Steamers is what it's called. What did you guys think of that one?
I thought it was really good because it established the difference in character in in the characters Quinn and Daria immediately.
Quinn is her sister.
Yeah, Quinn is her sister, by the way. But it really does establish the difference in character and how, like, that was going to be a possible, like, conflict in future episodes. It also just set up, like, the type of character Daria was compared to other people. And
we also got to meet Jane, her best friend.
Yeah.
So that was kind of important, because Jane's a constant throughout the entire series. So,
I also feel like the tone and pacing of the pilot is more of what I remember about, or not pilot, but the first episode is more of what I remember about Daria. And as we get into talking about the other episodes, that's the stuff that kind of surprised me more, because that's the stuff that I guess, given also when it aired, I had aged out of being able to watch it on a regular basis.
Right.
And so I didn't realize how much depth later came into play in the later seasons.
You would have been right about the right age in 1997 to be watching this. Like, this was aimed at your demographic.
I know, but what I'm saying is that the later...
I'm just saying this cartoon was targeted at young women in their teens who were in high school. And
I mean, absolutely. And that's part of the reason why I liked it, but it was the first season, the earlier episodes and stuff are definitely more kind of just more on the lighthearted sarcasm side of things.
Yeah.
And then it seems like in the later seasons they got more into more detailed and nuanced storytelling.
Yeah. Which is unusual for this this podcast so far. Generally, the worse the show gets in the later seasons.
Right.
And for me, I felt like this show got a huge glow up from the first episode until the last that we watched.
Again, like we watched an episode in season 4, and then we just watched one in season 5, and those two make me want to go back and rewatch the entire run.
Yeah.
Because there's clearly things that well, again, if it came out in 97, so I would have been between freshman and sophomore year.
So, yeah, again,
so dead
targeted
on,
right
target
at you.
demographic.
Yeah.
But then by the time it ended, I mean, we're talking about, what was it, to 2002?
2002. You were out of high school by then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You and I were about to meet.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I wasn't, and I also know that,
4 years later, you were married.
I need to go have some sort of existential crisis right now.
Back to a little bit back to Daria's best friend of the series, Jane.
Yeah.
I really liked how Jane wasn't a complete opposite of Daria.
I liked that too.
Because in a lot of shows where there's a cynical character and they have a best friend, the best friend's normally the preppy character, more like Quinn, their sister, Daria's sister's type. Mm-hmm. But I really liked that they still had similarities, even though they were definitely different in certain ways. Jane was able to connect a bit better with people than Daria, and everything, and wasn't as serious. But they still had similarities in how they were very sarcastic. They very much judged other people. Yeah. And I really like how, because that's more realistic in a real friendship.
It is. Birds of a feather flock together.
Because a lot of people like have a lot of similarities with someone, even if they're not exactly alike.
Right.
So I was very happy to see that.
I also liked, because in your example, there's usually a straight man and then the comedy one, the funny one.
Yeah.
And so in a normal situation, you would have seen that, where Daria would be the dour and the
dry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then you'd have somebody who's all bubbly in personality, which is kind of Quinn, her sister. But you're right. Jane was they're very similar in character, but yet slightly different.
Well, Jane had her moments of providing levity to Daria, because if you had two of them that were that down, I mean, the whole show would be just horribly depressing. But, Jane was just like... Jane, in some ways, to me... And I think why she became such a fan favorite is because she's the viewer. She's the one who's like, I can be serious in this, but then also I'm going to sit back and laugh because life should not be that serious.
Right. Yeah.
Also, they did have, like, good comedy moments, like, together. Like, I really liked it whenever they both, like, had a situation, like, let's say they were done talking to someone, they would both turn to each other and have sarcastic comments about that person and, like, have comedic moments in that.
Which is real life. I mean, that's what we do with our friends.
It felt really real. It felt like a good, real friendship.
Yeah.
Even if and also, it was better because in later seasons, they dealt with conflict between each other.
Yeah.
And they still stayed strong in that friendship, even if they were mad at each other.
Right.
And that does happen.
Well, that we know.
True.
One of those episodes, it ended very unsure, where,
I was about to say, let's talk about that one.
Yeah, Jane is like...
That's where the show, that's of the episodes we watched, was season 4, episode 13, Die, My Darling. That was the one that, like, made me kind of, like, take a step back and be too. Like, whoa,
it was like, okay.
This is a pretty good show. In that one, Jane asks Daria to dye her hair, and Daria's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to screw it up. I don't want to do this. But Jane talks her into it, and then Daria screws it up. But then Jane accuses Daria of doing it on purpose because Daria would be jealous of Jane's relationship with a boy named Tom. And later in the episode, Tom and Daria kiss more than once. And so clearly there are feelings between them. Mm-hmm. And you're right. At the end of that episode, we don't know if Jane and Daria are still really going to be friends.
Because Jane even says as much. Yeah. She's like, I don't know. And that's how it ends.
Yeah. And that's not something you would see a lot in cartoons at the time.
No, but you definitely... That's real.
A lot of cartoons at the time, and even now, really do stick to, okay, these guys are going to be friends forever. They are meant to be. But
you don't break up the Scooby Gang.
Yeah, but this show definitely dealt with the conflict of, what if you and your friends do get into a fight?
Yeah.
That does leave a pretty big impact on your friendship. What do you do in that situation?
Yeah.
And I think it handled it really well, because it showed that they communicated with each other, and they both accepted that, hey, I'm mad at you, and I don't know how to feel about you anymore. And that's just how it went.
Yeah.
And I think, like, later on, like, they definitely made up in some way.
Right.
But it still felt a little tense. And it still felt like, okay, we know that they hurt each other in the past, and and that happened. But they're at least slowly moving on. And it isn't an immediate, okay, you're my best friend again. It's I don't know how to feel about you.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's next.
And then by the last episode that we watched, which is called Boxing Daria, which is the last episode of the series, not necessarily a season or a series finale. We'll talk about that in a minute. But in that episode, they've seemed to have really turned a corner, because when Daria needs Jane, Daria needs someone to talk to, she calls Jane and she says, "You're the only person I trust." Mm-hmm. And so clearly they've reconciled, and they've probably grown closer.
Well, but at the same time, I definitely feel like the framing of that felt like it was supposed to be a poignant moment. So I wonder if all during that 5th season, there is kind of a, like, I don't know if I trust you, I don't know if I trust you, and, like, there is that back and forth.
That's true.
Because
we wouldn't
it definitely
know.
felt like it was supposed to be a moment when she tells her, "You're the one I trust the most."
No, you're right. And maybe if we'd watched the rest of it, we'd know
it definitely felt like an important moment, even though, like, of course it is an important moment, since it's like them, like, showing that, hey, we had fights in the past, but I still trust you, you're still my friend.
Right.
But it also was important because it was a good turning point from how Daria acted in the first episode to now, because I don't believe that first episode Daria would have ran up and hugged Jane, or or even called anyone when she needed help.
I could see that.
But as soon as she was in, like, deep trouble and
needed someone,
and deep emotional, like, needed some emotional support, suddenly she calls Jane. She hugs her as soon as she enters the diner.
Well, even Jane, when that happened, Jane still was kind of like, what is this all about? Like, it's clearly not something they did. You could see
in Jane's face that, like, she was like, okay, something's actually wrong. Something's really wrong.
Yeah. As I said, it was the last episode we watched was the final episode of the series, but it wasn't a series finale. The show was canceled before they got an official series finale. The last regular episode of the show aired on June 25th, 2001, but the producers were able to develop a second 75-minute movie, the first one they did a few years earlier. This one was called Is It College Yet? And it was released in January of 2002, and it was kind of a more satisfying ending for the series. In that movie, we see Daria and her friends figuring out their post-high school graduation lives. So it kind of wrapped everything up nicely, and a lot of them went their separate ways. So we kind of see, how they reconciled their relationships and what they decided to do. Now, unfortunately, that's not on Paramount Plus, where we watched these episodes. But you can get them on DVD, but we didn't have time to get them.
Yeah.
So. But what did you guys think of the art style?
I personally liked the art style. It's not like my favorite art style, but I definitely appreciate it, and I definitely find some really good things about it, like the line work. Line work, the fact that it's kind of a mix between really thick line art and also more thinner, more clean line art. It kind of gave me a bit of that, like, this is a high schooler's drawing vibe. I don't know if that makes sense.
Sure.
But essentially, when you look at the art style, it definitely gives me a feeling that, like, maybe a high schooler drew this, or maybe even like Daria drew this, or something like that.
I could see that.
Because it definitely looked like, it didn't look like a digital pen. It looked more like...
Well, it wasn't.
True.
For me personally, I really do like the dark outline, and that was kind of a thing at the time. I remember the Clerks cartoon had a similar really dark, thick, black outline for their characters. And we were just talking about Clone High. That also had, not as thick, but it had a nice, thick, dark outline.
It also had, like, more straight lines and, like...
A lot of angles.
And Daria dealt with straight lines mixed with curvy ones, like with the hair and everything.
Yeah.
Which, it worked really well in its favor.
Yeah.
It was a very simple art style at the same time, the very flat colors.
I was going to say, that is what bothers me, is I wasn't a fan of the style of it. I also really, and this bugged me, and I know it's a silly little thing because it does it in all the cartoons, but there's a lot of moments where there's no motion, where it's just a talking head, and there's no motion, and all you see are their lips moving, and I don't know, it didn't feel very complete to me. It seemed almost webcomic-y before webcomics.
See, all these things are the things that I love about it.
Well, and that's fine.
Because it reminds me of kind of that, I don't know, it's pop art-ish, Keith Haring graffiti, like, again, bold lines, heavy lines.
Yeah, that's very
But then
Haring.
Also, it's more... because you don't have, like, motion, action, all that stuff, it is more like a quieter, pay attention to the dialogue type of show. There's nothing to distract you. It is just in front of you.
That's fair.
It also definitely made sense for whenever Jane and Daria just stood and talked to one another, because because they're different than everyone else in the show. They don't like, I don't know how to describe this. Basically,
they don't really emote.
They don't really emote, and they don't really show those emotions with their movement. They mostly just use their sarcastic dialogue.
Yeah.
And I feel like that really fits with who they are as characters, and the art style kind of reflects that. That's fair. They're just talking and they're being sarcastic, and they're not emoting in like a physical way.
That's fair.
I mean, well, they rely heavier on, even though the eyes and eyebrows are drawn very simply, that's where all your motion and emoting is coming in. It's a lot more side-eye, it's a lot more, a raised eyebrow here, while, like, one person might be talking over here, but if you're watching our characters, like, they're making faces at each other kind of thing.
I guess I didn't catch up on all that nuance then.
I mean, it's not like they're pulling exaggerated faces.
I know.
It's like a side eye and a raised eyebrow, like,
yeah.
Are you listening to this type of thing? Which is kind of like, it's kind of the whole vibe. It's Daria and Jane are our Statler and Waldorf. There are ones sometimes doing the commentary on what else is going on within the episode.
I will say, in one of the episodes we watched, they went to a concert. And at the concert, I saw a lot of people that I knew from the mid to late 90s in that crowd. Like, they did a really good job of capturing the essence and the fashion of that time period.
Yes.
I also really liked that they added more, like, goth and punk characters, because you don't see those very often in modern cartoons that I grew up with. You don't see that much, but in this show, it was like more of a prominent thing. It was more of a common thing.
That was the culture at the time.
Yeah,
I understand that.
It was just kind of becoming a big thing at that time, so I think they were trying to reflect that.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's still cool.
It was still interesting, especially because like it showed different ways. Like, because I'm
just different personalities.
I'm on the internet. I've seen plenty of people who are in the punk and goth.
Yeah.
And emo subcultures and everything, and so it's fun to see them drawing different versions of punk or different versions of goth, like showing it's not just one thing.
Right.
I also think, given the age difference, I think you're talking about they're drawing like the children of punk.
Well,
and
yes.
you guys are like the grandchildren, great-grandchildren of punk.
True.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's interesting, I was just thinking about this. You're talking about all the different styles and the goth and all that stuff. And the goths that I grew up with are emo, goth, long coat, all that stuff. And I want to say about the time this aired is also the time that Hot Topic opened locally and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's like, it was all
happening at that time.
Yeah, and, you know, it's the time of the Delia's catalog and the Alloy catalog and this borderline, like, alternative, like, skater wear starting to become mainstream, and...
from my personal experience, I know we were starting to get into kind of the pop punk Green Day era, and that plays into that, you know, the Thrasher stuff, because that's when, you know, the board shorts became popular, and, you know, slip-on shoes, and, you know...
Skater.
Yeah, the skater aesthetic kind of became a thing, so... And I did see some of that reflected in Daria, which is...
I still think it's interesting how... It's also interesting how much detail they put in some of the background characters. Okay.
That's true, too,
Although the style of Daria isn't like super detailed, they still added some detail to the characters that you're not supposed to. They gave them personality. You're not supposed to focus on. And like they added like piercings or different hair colors or like different hairstyles or clothing to really show a bit of like depth to these background characters. Like and that's very important in an animated show. You don't want your background characters to all look the same or all
blend
to
into
have
the background.
Yeah. You still want them to show up and like make it seem more like a lively concert or a lively town. Like you still want it to feel like people live there other than the main characters.
Yeah.
And I think that was very important and very good on their part.
Yeah. As I said, I feel like the series got a lot more in depth and mature and emotional. I have to say that makes me really curious to go back and watch some of these. I wonder if there's, you know, a single episode that really became that or really started that influence. I'd be really interested to see if there's anything online that talks about that, because I'd love to see where that switch took place, or if it was more of a gradual thing. I don't know.
Yeah, never know.
Which, like, Boxing
Daria,
the last one that we watched, that one got really emotional, like, really quickly in the episode, and that kind of made me step back and was just like, oh, this is the type of episode we're going to be getting into.
Yeah.
I feel like there's not a real way to fully recap it, because I feel like we've all just kind of, it's been an appetizer for us.
Yeah.
Like, this is definitely something I could see me putting on while I'm working on something else, so I can, like, mostly pay attention to it, just so I could get through it again. Like, watch the whole run of it and see.
I never watched any of this. I might have caught an episode here and there when it first started, but, you know, like you said, by 1987, I was out of high school. I was working a full-time job. I wasn't sitting around watching MTV cartoons. So this one I really didn't have much exposure to, other than, like, the cultural osmosis of she's a cynical, you know...
Right.
Kind of feminist, kind of, I don't know. You know, I didn't really know much about Daria until we sat down and watched this.
Well, and I mean, and I'm fully willing to admit that, you know, because at the time I was a self-absorbed high schooler, like, but I definitely don't feel like I don't feel like I ever knew, like, oh, at this time of day, Daria is on, because I feel like MTV really had times where they were just like, we'll just throw whatever up and see, and then you'd be like, oh, I hope I can catch it in rerun.
Right. Which you probably could, because it was MTV.
Probably could, but, you know, sometimes it'd be at 2 a.m, or sometimes it'd be at, you know, whatever.
1 o'clock in the afternoon. When
on the off chance any youths listen to this, rerun is when a network replays an episode they've already played. Because we couldn't just pause it, tape it, or tape it, you could, and that's a whole other tangent.
You're old.
Yeah.
That's the point of this.
But
I'm the middle old.
I really liked Boxing Daria. As a, like, although it's not the final episode, it still felt like a final episode, and I definitely like it as a final episode, because it kind of, like, I'm just making a guess that most of the, like, a bit of the series was, pretty emotional like that, but, it definitely wrapped up and made us suddenly, like, understand how like understand that this character is cynical, has always been cynical, and it also gives us more depth in the family of Daria's family, and like it definitely showed that like we already knew that her parents were very stressed, but we saw how Daria played into that stress.
Right.
We saw how Daria played into being very different from her sister, and like that definitely showed in how Daria has both affected the family and how the family has affected her.
But at the same time, I think more so it shows that the stress of mom and dad caused them to be more stressed about Daria, about her situation. It was never her. But the thing is her as a child, the way her brain could process it is that it was her.
Right.
Yeah. And not that like they later said, like we knew you are so smart and so, bright and self-reflecting that you are going to have a hard time in life. But it was never that they were upset at her. It was that they were frustrated that their child was having a hard time.
Right. But she was unhappy.
Right. But, through a child's lens, that they don't see that kind of nuance. Right. They see mom, dad unhappy and saying my name. So...
True.
And to go back to what you were saying, I think you're absolutely right that it does make a nice bookend, because the very first episode we see stressed out parents who aren't paying attention to anyone, let alone, to each other or the kids. You see a very shallow sister who doesn't seem to like Daria. Then you have Daria, who is just down and cynical and doesn't like anyone. And then by the end of the series here, we have Daria, who is hugging a friend, which you've never seen, confiding in that friend. And then she goes and talks to her parents, who then are showing emotion and showing caring and understanding towards her. And more importantly, she's able to self-reflect and say, oh my God, I caused this problem. Maybe I'm part of the problem. It wasn't just my parents were terrible. Yeah. And then finally, Quinn actually shows some empathy and gives her the big box that Daria was hiding out in again, and even reminds Daria of the trauma that had happened with the big parental fight. So you're kind of right. It almost has a character arc where things are very different in the very beginning to where they ended up, even in this last episode.
The character development in the show with the main family is one that you kind of have to pay attention to really closely to understand, because like in the first episode they're already established like the type of flaws that you would expect the characters to develop from, and from the in-between episodes, like before the final episode, like you can kind of see it, but it's only if you look really closely.
Yeah.
And then at the final episode, you see that character development in full of like the parents noticing and like being caring and communicating with Daria, Quinn showing some empathy towards her older sister and like trying to help her out, and Daria being more empathetic and like seeking comfort in another person.
Yeah.
And like that is one that like that's character development that you really need to pay attention to actually notice. And I kind of noticed it with Quinn a little bit, just because like Quinn was trying to connect with her mom in one episode as a side plot.
Yeah.
I noticed it with Daria, of course, because Daria is the main character. Whenever she was like talking to Jane and trying to communicate with Jane. But yeah, it's one of those ones that are it's both fascinating, but also it's really easy to miss.
Sure. Yeah. You have to kind of know the characters pretty well to see how they've changed.
And I feel like if we watched more episodes, we would see a lot more
evolution.
of that change.
Right.
But it still felt natural to see Quinn being empathetic and helping out her older sister. It still felt natural to see Daria's parents like talking to her and communicating their feelings towards her.
Right.
And her seeking comfort in her friend.
Yeah.
You do see parts of that. Like, I can remember episodes where, like, Quinn shows surprising behavior. So you almost get the impression sometimes that the Quinn's shallowness to some degree is an act. It's what she thinks the world expects of her.
Sure.
We even saw it in, like, Boxing with Daria flashbacks. Is in one scene it's Daria and her parents and Quinn driving back from Daria's counseling session, and Daria Daria and her parents are talking in the car, and Quinn keeps on, like, mentioning that, like, she's okay with playing. Right. She's okay with doing this.
But you know what?
Which shows the comparison that maybe Quinn felt like she needed to...
She needed to please.
She needed to please her parents because she saw that they were upset, and she also needed to please others.
Well, and she saw that Daria was the one that was making them upset, so she was trying to be the anti-Daria.
Yeah.
She was trying to be bubbly and social and friendly and talkative.
Basically trying to be the child that she thinks that her parents would want.
Exactly. You disagree?
I just don't think that much thought went into that, because they said early on that, like, Daria's 5'6", Quinn is like 3 years old. That's just a 3-year-old. You're talking about a topic, and they chime in and say what they can do about it. Our 8-year-old still does it.
Yes, but I am going to say that my relationship with my sister was similar in that my sister got into a lot of trouble when she was in junior high and high school, and even as a young child, I became a straight arrow and never got into trouble, never did anything wrong, because I recognized that my sister's behavior was stressful on my parents. There were a lot of fights where my parents were arguing with my sister about something my sister did or did not do, namely homework or tests or whatever. And so I know I am the person I am today because of my sister getting in trouble. And I was very young when that started. She's 8 years older than I am. And so we're talking I was 4 or 5 when I started to change who I was so that I didn't cause my parents that kind of stress.
I mean, I can see that, but I can just see that, like, when you have a toddler and you're talking about something, they just want to be a part of the conversation.
I think it's a bit of a mix of both just being a toddler and also the seeing, hey, my parents are upset because my older sister's not being social. I'm going to be social. I'm going to be preppy because I want to make them happy. I think it's a mix of that.
It could be
like toddler, I want to join this now.
Definitely the energy Quinn was showing in the back seat
was definitely a toddler.
Where she just could not sit still. Literally, They had her jittering on the frame, and that was really very accurate.
And that's what I mean is why I feel like a lot of thought was put into the fact that, like, she's just 3.
Yeah.
And I understand that that's part of her character as later grows up to be just more like the family.
Right.
But I don't know. I didn't feel like there was any kind of major subtext there besides her just being a 3-year-old.
That's fair. I guess, Harper, would you watch more of this?
I'd probably watch more of this because I'm really into, this is just me being a character obsessed person. I really liked the character development shown in the like comparing to the first episode and the last episode, so I would love to see what happens between that.
Sure.
And like seeing like the characters act. I also just really liked how Jane and Daria spoke to one another. I thought that was great. Yeah. And relatable. So yeah, I would definitely watch this.
Cool. Again, as someone who didn't watch any of this when it was airing, I thought it was all basically the first episode. I didn't think it was that deep. I thought it was kind of a little bit more mature Beavis and Butthead, where it was just a lot of cynical and funny and stuff like that. I didn't realize how emotional and how deep this show got.
I love the comparison of Beavis and Butthead, 2 kids just getting in trouble and being dumb.
Yeah.
Daria, we're gonna crush your heart.
Well, but that's not what the first episode is. The first episode is pretty light and it's kind of silly. But then as we got into the later seasons, I gotta say, like that first one we watched, Die Darla, My Darla, whatever it was, that one hit me hard, and I was like, whoa. This show is something different.
See,
so I could definitely.
A real show. It's emotional.
Right. I could definitely see me going back and, like you said, have it on in the background while I'm doing other things. I don't know if I'd sit there and focus for 25 minutes.
Because I don't feel like you need to. Because they always break up everything with some sort of levity.
And again, there's so much, as you were saying, non-action. It's so much just a static screen.
A lot of these you could just
dialogue.
Listen to.
Yeah, exactly.
You could absolutely put this on and put headphones on and just be...
I don't know that you really need to watch it necessarily.
Not always, no.
So I definitely think I'd watch this one too, which is surprising me because I didn't think this show had that much depth when you suggested it.
I'm very glad that it got really into depth.
Yeah,
this might just be because of what what cartoons I've grown up with. But I really liked how it got, like, kind of emotional, how it dealt with, like, friend struggles. That was a big thing. I'm just like, oh, I'm so glad you talked about this.
That's what you deal with in high school.
Yeah.
You know, so it makes absolute sense.
So it makes a lot of sense, like, that they brought it up, and they were just like, yeah, this happens. Here's one possibility, like, here's one outcome that can happen if this happens to you.
Here's how you can handle it. Mm-hmm. Well, aside from that, the show is being spun off once again. So it's going to be a spin-off of a spin-off. Mm-hmm. There's a new show called Jody. Now, we never saw Jody on the episodes we watched.
Yes, we did.
Did we?
Just very little.
Oh, okay.
Jody was on a couple of them.
I don't remember that.
I think Jody just, like, came up and talked to them and, like, put in a little bit of, like, just a little bit of the plot.
Okay.
Like, basically just talked about something that happened. But
she wasn't a major character.
But she was not a major character.
Okay. No, I mean in the ones we watched.
I know, but I want to say that she was like the third one in one of them.
Okay. I don't remember, I guess. Anyway, Jody is coming back as her own show. It was supposed to be Daria and Jody, but they dropped Daria for whatever reason. And so now it's just going to be Jody. That has been announced by MTV Studios. It's actually going to air on Comedy Central, though. But they have no air date yet. So I'll be curious to see what they do with that.
I would like to check that out just to see what changed, and also, like, what changed in the show style, and also what changed, like, in what topics they talk about.
Well, it is a more modern show. Basically, the storyline is that Jody graduates high school, goes to college, goes to a good school, because she was, like, a really good student, apparently. Again, I don't know the character, but... and so she goes to a really good school, and she gets a job in, like, a startup. And so she's going to be talking about tech and employment and dating, because she's, I guess, it's kind of weird. She's, like, now in her 20s, even though the show ended 20 years ago, so she should be in her 40s or whatever.
Yeah, but, you know.
They're kind of skipping time there a little bit.
And that's okay.
It's
where we left off.
And that's exactly right, yeah. What's kind of interesting about it, though, is that it is going to be the first cartoon with a lead character that is a black woman since, like, 2003. There was a show called Hey Moni, which was on BET. I don't remember.
I remember.
Do you really? Yeah.
I don't know that I ever watched it, but I definitely remember, like, commercials for it.
That was the last cartoon that starred a black woman. And so this is going to be kind of the first in a long time, and I think that's pretty cool.
I think that's really great. I really like that.
The show is going to star Tracy Ellis Ross, who's currently on ABC's sitcom Blackish, a show I don't watch because we don't have normal TV and we don't
have time to watch television.
No, we don't really do sitcoms in general either.
Lapse.
Well, yeah, that's true too.
These episodes.
So yeah, it's just kind of I'll be interested to see what they do with that.
I'll be interested, like, to see more of that character, because I really liked Jodie's character design, and, like, I really liked what they did, like, with the character. I like what they did with the character design wise. They basically just had her speak a few lines that were meaningful to the plot.
You haven't truly met her yet, because you've only watched this
handful of episodes.
And I can't wait to see more of that character, because again, with the background characters, the characters who only have a few lines, there's, like, you can just see in the design that there's a lot of depth to them, and I'm really excited to see what Jodie's character has in store.
I'm really curious to see if they keep the animation style, or if they try to modernize it a little bit.
If they modernize it, I don't think they will keep anybody. I don't know, like, the Daria style is recognizable.
It is. It's very it's very the show. Like,
and
it's Daria.
It won't feel like a Daria cartoon.
And I wonder.
And I mean, if they want to completely separate, I could see them changing it.
Yeah.
Obviously, we'll be able to tell the difference because of the fact that it'll be probably digitally produced, where these may have not have been, at least especially in the beginning.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hope that they keep that, like, kind of flatter colors, blocky type of thing.
I do wonder if they're going to try to separate it entirely, because they've taken Daria out already. Because, again, she was supposed to be part of the show, and now she's not. Now, I don't know if she might have cameos.
She will. I would imagine they're gonna.
I would think so.
They're gonna have something like.
They gotta tie it in somehow.
Jodie mentions she got a text, or email or something.
Or they'll Zoom call each other or something like that.
Right.
That, or they'll just mention, "Oh, do you remember Daria?" Like something like that.
Yeah.
They'll do something.
I would think they'd tie it in somehow, but we'll see.
I'm really excited because to see what happens with the story, because like the way that you described it and like what they've mentioned that the story will be about so far seems really interesting. Like that's something that I would definitely want to watch.
And I would love to see Daria's take on today. You know?
Well, and I'm sure we will get some of that through Jodie too.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. I meant Daria
as a
concept, not as the character. Yes, yeah, I would like to see the Daria show's take on today. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. So, well, I mean, I think we've kind of covered everything. I gotta say, Daria was pretty cool.
It was.
I was very surprised by it. I think I'll go back and watch some more of it, and it sounds like we probably all will at some point. So,
I certainly will.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for checking out this episode of Generation Toon. Be sure to subscribe today so you can join us as we discuss our favorite cartoons from the last 40 years. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Instagram, both at SMX Audio, where we're available to talk tunes anytime. This has been your host, Rob Lamley, for the Space Monkey X Audio Workshop. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you all next time.